Well, howdy there, Internet students. It's Mr. Hermanson again. And today we're going to learn how to perform operations on, if I can get the highlighter pen here, perform operations with rational numbers, which means we're going to learn how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers. And the word for whole positive and negative numbers is integers. All right, so we are going to we're going to use this idea of chips to help us do that. We're going to have some negative chips, some positive, and so this is a -1 represented by this red chip here, and this is a +1 represented by this yellow chip. So the idea here is if you add a -1 and a 1 together, that'll make a 0. And when you make zeros, basically that just makes that disappear. So if you look at these first groups here, when there are no negatives in there, there's nothing you need to worry about. It's just 1, +1, +1, so the value is 3. These are all -1s, so the value of this picture is -5 because you have 5 -1s. Now when you have a negative and a positive, let's circle those together, because together that's a 0. And other than that 0 right there, we have a 1, so the value of this group is 1. We can circle this pair. There's a 0 there, there's a 0 there, and if we combine those, we get 0. Go ahead and do the last two, write down the values, and you can check back with me and see what you got. So here's what I think you should have got on those. All right, and another thing about this, if you look at these pictures, they actually create a math problem. Like here you have two 1s, two +1s, and a -1. If we combine those, that makes this addition expression, 2 plus -1, which equals, we found out 1. Here we have two positives and two negatives. Here we have two positives and four negatives. So it makes that expression 2 plus -4, and so on. So we're going to use this idea to find the value of expressions. Okay, so here's an example of how you do that. So you're going to match up positive and negatives so that you can turn them into zeros and then count the remaining chips. And then we're going to write an expression for that also. All right, and I'll show you how to do that on the next page. So I'll do this one up here so I have a little more room here. But we have -7 plus -3, so I'm going to do some negatives. Now you can use whatever color you want. It doesn't matter that they were using red and yellow. I'll use blue and I'll just put a negative in all of those. That's my -7. And then over here I'll do 3 more negatives. -3. And if they're all the same, there are no zeros in there, then you just count them up and we can see we have a total of 10 negatives. Okay, so go ahead, you do B and C, B, C, and D, and we'll check back and see if you got the right answer. All right, here's what I got. All right, now on this one we have some positives and negatives, so we're going to have to do it a little bit differently. But let's go ahead and draw what we have here. We got 3 negatives, and then we have 8 positives. So these are all positives. Now, if you just want to put the negatives in the negative circles, that's fine with me. But these would all be pluses. Okay. Then we're going to combine the positive and negatives to make zeros. There's a 0. There's a 0. There's a 0. So these are all zeros. So then we just add up the remaining and we see there's 5 of them. Now we're going to write an expression to represent what we just did there so we can kind of get used to this. But we have -3 plus 8 is what we started with. Now what we did is we took 3 from those 8. And so I still have the 8 represented here as 3 plus 5. And then the -3 plus 3 is actually 0 plus 5, and that's just 5. Okay, so why don't you try that with F through H and see how you do. So here's what you should have here. I'm kind of getting a little lazy. What I'm thinking is we can just cross off our zeros and like that, and then we can write what we have left there. The expression would be this, 5 plus -7, and what I did is I split that -7 into -5 and 2, and then these two combine to make 0. Oops, got my negative there. All right, let's try something else, a little bit different. How do you do subtraction? Well, remember that subtraction means, so I'll write it right here, we're taking away negative. So we have to create a situation where we have some negatives that we can take away. Subtraction means taking away a negative. Okay, so if you look at the example, you'll see what they did. They combined these, which is really adding 0 to the first 5 here, and they did that so they could take away the -2. Now, when you take away those -2 from that grouping, you see that you're left with 7. Okay, so I'll do a couple examples like that for you, and then you can try some. So on this first problem, we have to take away 3 from 7. So let's start by putting in 7 positives, right? Okay, those are all positives. Now we have to take away 3 from those. Those are positives, taking away 3 positives. So we're gonna, so on this one, it's pretty simple. We have all kinds of positives we can take away. So let's just get rid of 3 of them. And I'll just cross those out. And we can see in the end, we're left with 4. Well, of course, you guys probably knew that 7 minus 3 is 4. So that's not a big deal to you. But how about this next one? Here we have to be able to take away some negatives. So let's start with 9 negatives. There's 9 negatives right there. And from those 9 negatives, we have to take away 2 of those negatives. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's just cross out 2 of those. And we can see that we are left with 7 negatives. So all right, on the next one, we start with 7 negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And from those 7, we're going to take away 3 of those negatives. All right. I'll go ahead and do 6 and 7. And you can check back and see if you got those right. And then I'll talk to you again when we do number 8. Okay, so here's the math behind that. This next one, you'll see that we have a bit of a problem when we try to take some away. So I'll just draw my 4 positives here. And we need to take away from that 3 negatives. Well, we don't have 3 negatives to take away. They're all positives. So let's go ahead and put 3 negatives so we can take them away. Now, you can't just put those in there unless you're adding zeros all the time. So if I make each of those zeros, then I'm okay. See, now I just have my original 4 plus 3 zeros, which is fine. Now I can take away those 3 negatives, and I can see that I end up with 7 positives. Okay, so here's the math behind that. If I do 4 minus negative 3, well, what I can do there is I can start with my 4, because we have to take away negative 3. I can start with my 4, and then to get my negative 3, I'll just add negative 3 in there, but to keep it at 0, I need to add 3 to that. Well, now I have negative 3 that I can take away, and lo and behold, look what happens. You end up with 4 plus 3, which is 7. So let's do one more of those, and then I'll let you try a couple. So we're starting with negative 5 here. So let's just make 5 negatives. And we need to take away 2 from that. Those 2's are positives. So let's go ahead and put 2 in here. They're positives. But we don't want to change the value, so let's just make those zeros by putting negatives along with those. Well, now I have 2 positives that I can take away, and I end up with 7 negatives. So here again, here's the math. You have your negative 5. To that negative 5, I added 2, and then I added negative 2 just to make it 0. And now I have 2 positives that I can take away. Well, I end up with a negative 5 and a negative 2 combined, which makes negative 7. All right, go ahead. You try 10 and 11, see what happens. All right, well, here's what I got. I got negative 7 and 7. So that's the end of the lesson. You can go ahead and fill in this reflection if you like. And that'll give you an idea of what kind of questions you might want to ask me. And then go ahead and do these homework problems in your notebook, and then do the Google form to submit your answers to selected problems. All right, good luck with that. We'll talk to you soon.